I haven't played a lot of memorable horror games these days, so I'm always on the lookout for more. This brought me to Bloober Team's 2021 release, The Medium. It's not a AAA budget game, but it's Bloober Team's most ambitious and visually impressive game thus far. What I didn't know before playing was just how much Polish influence The Medium has. A Polish studio, setting, artist influence, culture, and history. They wanted to tell a story about life in Poland as it transitioned out of the Cold War from the late 80s to the late 90s. It was refreshing having the opportunity to learn more about Poland through this game, and how games in general can be a gateway to learn about another's culture and history. It was even planned to have a Polish dub, that they unfortunately couldn't add due to developing the game during pandemic limitations. The Medium piqued my curiosity with its dual reality gameplay, its striking environments inspired by Polish artist Zdzisław Beksiński, and simply to fuel my love for horror games. The Medium is story-focused with puzzle exploration and light horror elements. Bloober Team asked for its players' impressions, so I'm here to give mine. Marianne lives with this recurring dream of a man shooting a young girl by a lake. You'll be playing out the events recounted by Marianne that lead up to the conclusion of this mystery and her supernatural powers. The Medium has one of the strongest introductions I've seen in a long time. It serves as an invisible tutorial and an exploration of Marianne's character and past. It hooks you by showcasing her powers and the emotional storytelling that comes with it. The game begins on a rainy day with Marianne returning to her childhood home in order to lay her foster father, Jack Orkin, to rest. As Marianne explores her old home, she'll come across all kinds of mementos, reminiscing on the stories of her past. By glancing at the calendar and newspaper, you'll learn the time and place. Poland in the year 1999. Marianne's room shows photos from her old orphanage, expressing her compassion as she talks about how she would frequently go back to visit the other children. There's her ICU admission card, detailing the second-degree burns she received at the age of 3, with some scars you can still see on her face today. She even has this old parent-teacher meeting request from her school, detailing how she was misunderstood, getting herself in trouble with her supernatural powers. In Jack's room lies a photo of himself and Marianne. She talks about how she finally has a place to belong growing up with Jack, how he taught her to accept her condition, and how out of all of the foster parents, he was the one to accept her for who she was. The apartment gives you this safe space to introduce you to the Medium's gameplay mechanics. Marianne searches the house for Jack's tie clip, interacting with many other things if you take the time. You're taught how to use Insight, an ability that highlights or reveals important objects in the world. Using Insight reveals the tie clip. Feeding the cat teaches you how to store and use items in your inventory, and combining the tie with the tie clip teaches you how to combine items. Developing Jack's photo in the dark room gives you a simple puzzle to solve using the instructions and tools in the environment. When you're done in the apartment, you'll head to Jack's funeral home located downstairs. Because Marianne grew up around a funeral home, it shows that she's grown up around the means to hone her powers, that by the game's start, she's already familiar and skilled at what she does. Marianne's a great protagonist. She's capable and reflective. She's an outcast who's had a hard time fitting in. She's been doing this for a long time, but has been haunted by this strange dream for just as long. I like the kind and experienced disposition she has when interacting with spirits. She never judges spirits, only sends them on their way. This omission of judgment makes for some awkward interactions later in the game, but I'll save that for when it's more relevant. She's soon interrupted preparing Jack, as the Medium Spotlight dual reality mechanic is masterfully shown off for the first time. The screen splits as Jack's voice is heard behind her, troubled over a lost notebook. It's sad seeing Jack troubled over something so trivial, given the peaceful, restful state of his passing. He brings up his worry over his upcoming surgery, which was well-founded given that we now know the result. Despite this, he's still worried about Marianne, asking if she'll be alright, and bringing up his promise to always protect her. It's sad seeing this abrupt, but final time seeing Jack off into the afterlife. Marianne then calms him down, tempers his worries and fears, and sends him on his way. This shows her role and her self-imposed duty as a medium. It uses such powerful emotions to show Marianne and Jack's relationship to one another, and the emotional toll her powers can take. The Dual Worlds illustrates the disconnect that most people have to the spirit world, as Marianne seemingly talks and interacts with nothing from the mortal world's perspective, juxtaposed to this intense emotional moment taking place in the spirit world. No matter how many times I rewatch this cutscene, every time it brings me to tears. And all it took was 30 minutes of astounding environmental storytelling and the unique, inspired dual reality mechanic. After these events, Marianne receives a mysterious phone call from a man named Thomas. Thomas knowing about her abilities and the dreams of the girl at the lake. She's told to meet him at the now abandoned NIWA Workers Resort, and the intro credits roll. The medium sees Marianne travel to relevant locations, looking for Thomas and uncovering the mysteries of the Riva Resort as more is revealed. Marianne explores the mortal world for notes and objects, but more importantly, her powers allow her to draw out echoes and memories, all to help flesh out and explain past events taking place in these now empty halls. The best part of the game is its puzzle solving. Marianne will manipulate the mortal and the spirit world at the same time, in order to solve puzzles to navigate through each location. Solving puzzles with this supernatural theme is such a perfect fit for the Dual Worlds, and it's done really well. Most of the game's puzzles are environmental ones. With the Dual Worlds mechanic, Marianne is seen in both worlds performing the same actions in each, but with the limitations and benefits of each. If a staircase is broken in the mortal world but not the spirit world, then Marianne can't go that way. If there's danger in the spirit world but nothing in the mortal world, then Marianne can't go that way. Instead, you'll need to use her powers and search both worlds in order to navigate between them to find new ways to open up new pathways. Marianne can find these things called spirit wells that give her temporary access to a shield or a blast of energy. Finding and activating these spirit wells becomes an important step in a lot of these puzzles. Along with those abilities, Marianne also has access to an out-of-body experience at any time. This separates herself from and removes any limitations from the mortal world for a short time. The out-of-body experience is so thematically cool for this game. Not only does it expand the possibilities for puzzle solving, but it visually looks distinct and even painful for her. The screen flares red as the spirit world gets more space on the screen, with her body slowly fading away, visually showing how much time you have left. Some puzzles did give me trouble, but most made sense. The worst offender to me was the clock puzzle, not because it was too hard, but because after I found out the solution, I wasted an extra 10 minutes just figuring out how to leave the room before having to look it up. Turns out insight doesn't just highlight important interactable objects, but it also reveals them. I checked the correct shelf, but didn't check the correct shelf while using insight, so I couldn't find the switch to leave the room. I think insight is a helpful mechanic, but the point of it should just be to make it clear what and where the important interactable objects are. It should be a companion mechanic that helps make environmental inspection easier. I don't think it should be hiding or keeping you from interacting with those objects when it's not active. That only serves to add another layer of obscurity, and there would be no reason mechanically not to just keep insight on through the entire game. Thankfully, there aren't many times crucial information is hidden behind insight. In the medium's favor, they do keep you in a small space when puzzle solving. This keeps you from being overwhelmed, getting lost, and keeps relevant information and objects close by. The interface is also really clean. While controlling two screens at one time, there's some quirks that you might not think about. One of them being, how do the designers ensure you're interacting in the intended world with the correct items? What's really cool is that the face buttons are split between two worlds. If you want to interact with the mortal world, you use the X and Y buttons. If you want to interact with the spirit world, you use the A and B buttons. Your inventory is also color-coded, with mortal world items being white and spirit world being an orange-brown. This subtle game design simply accommodates its dual reality gameplay. Marianne's tools and the dual reality mechanic is just brimming with possibilities. They did a really great job with it. It's just so clear to me that this idea could continue to create unique puzzles and mechanics, and I'd love to see more. Let's not forget that the medium does advertise itself as a horror game. Rather than focusing on scaring the player, the medium is more interested in telling a story with haunting elements. A major part of the game is Marianne's connection to the spirit world. She communicates with the dead and learns about their traumatic pasts. The environments and atmosphere in the medium are striking and another one of its greatest strengths. I'd replay the game just to take in its meticulously designed worlds. The medium uses a fixed camera to carefully craft scenes for the player to experience. The developers use this fixed camera to great effect, using its ability to highlight and direct your attention, or even limit vision to build tension or fear. The spirit world is represented with a distinct crimson orange, and other times it's murky darkness with subtle undertones. It contains beautifully abstract environments inspired by Zdzisław Beksiński, a Polish artist who has a distinct style, painting disturbing, gloomy scenes filled with death, decay, and deformed figures. An interesting fact I learned about Beksiński is that he never named any of his works. He wanted to avoid any metaphorical interpretation of his paintings. The spirit world in the medium feels heavily inspired by Beksiński's art, while being respectful of it, taking only its themes. Flesh and bones line the walls, and the fixed camera angles showcase stretching landscapes and tall monuments. The transition in medium from painting to video game allows you to peer past the limited four edges of a painting and walking into an entire world, making for a truly special experience. The spirit world shouldn't take away from the careful attention to detail of the mortal world. The mortal world deserves just as much praise for its varied and detailed locations. Marianne's old home feels lived in. Warm, cozy lights fill her room, and it contains all of her interests and mementos. There's the cold, dark forest surrounding the Riva resort, with the only light being from Marianne's flashlight. Then there's the abandoned, untouched rooms and facilities of the resort itself. Areas in the resort are falling apart due to its age. The graffiti, flickering lights, and overgrown plant life express just how much time has passed since the resort was in its prime. There are glimpses of the past found in trashed rooms and hallways that contain the belongings of its once previous tenants. Along with the two worlds comes two composers to craft music for the medium, Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill fame, and Arkadiusz Reikowski. Both composed the medium's soundtrack. Not only is Akira Yamaoka's inclusion a great privilege, but each composer focused on creating music for a specific world. Yamaoka did most of the music for the spirit world, and Reikowski did most of the music for the mortal world, adding further distinction to the two worlds artistically. This is such a cool creative decision, and the soundtrack as a whole further strengthens the game's immersive world. All of this being said, there are some monsters living in the medium's world, and those interactions were some of the lowest points of the game for me. The main monster, Maw, appears in very segmented areas. These areas are pretty short, being either a chase or sneaking section. The worst part being the very first chase encounter with Maw. The cutscene shows Marianne taking 2 steps out of the darkness. The camera then fades to black. Then a new camera angle shows her running another 3 steps. And once you gain control, if you don't immediately know to run toward the camera, you'll instantly get grabbed and die. I think this scene could have been communicated a lot better, showing Marianne running for much longer during each camera shot, and giving you a bit more space before giving control back to the player. This isn't even the worst part of this segment, as it's not very clear where you go toward the final turn. You take a few easy turns until Maw appears in front of you, so I thought to myself, what are my options? Do you run into him? No, then you die. Do I turn around? No, you die. Beside him are 3 paths. The path he came from, the path to the left, and to the right, all covered in moths. The game has already taught me that moths hurt you, having to avoid them earlier in the game, and even just a couple turns earlier this chase sequence. So here I was redoing this chase sequence again and again, not realizing that the path to the left isn't completely covered in moths, just partially covered. So I learned that you need to swerve through Maw and the moths to get to the correct path. Repeatedly dying while figuring this out removed any kind of tension or fear I might have had. This could have been avoided by better spacing Marianne, Maw, and the different paths, or by removing any moths and adding light coming from the correct path to better grab the player's attention. Other sections had you sneaking or hiding with Maw patrolling the area. I use the word patrol intentionally, as areas like this are small, and Maul will walk the same path and repeat the same behavior. Though these sections are short, the predictable movement and lack of variation make them pretty boring overall. While I understand that the focus of the gameplay is different from what I want out of Maul's behavior, I still can't help but want more blurred lines between the moments featuring Maul. Right now, there's a very clear division between exploration and puzzle solving, and the moments where you're running or hiding from Maul. At the very least, I think removing the instant game over after being grabbed would improve the interactions between Maul and Marianne. There needs to be a very intentional balance in difficulty, especially in a horror game. If the player dies too many times and repeats content, you run the risk of pulling them out of their immersion and frustrating them. Make it too easy and the threat disappears. While I'm more opposed to an instant kill in the medium's case, if you want to keep it, a game that did it really well was Metroid Dread. When Samus is grabbed by an Emmy, she gets 2 chances to break free. Both chances have an extremely small window of time to parry, and the timing is always random. This heavily stacks things in the Emmy's favor, keeping them a threat while never taking control away from the player until the very end. It creates a situation you don't want to be in the first place, keeping the tension of normal gameplay high. I enjoyed the story. It has this cinematic, movie-like quality in its plot, pacing, and length. As you play through the game more and more, the pieces start to fit together. It's really satisfying getting closer to solving the mystery of the Riva Resort massacre, looking for Thomas, and having Marianne helping whoever she can along the way. The later reveals were well done. They very smartly omitted information that led to an interesting revelation when the time was right. Sometimes the slow walking speed made certain sections drag. It's done to emphasize the story, but a couple moments like walking down one long hallway after another, or at worst, walking through the same hedge maze 3 times in a row, does make me wish you walked at a slightly faster pace. What's funny is one moment even acknowledges the urgency of what's happening in the real world, by talking about how time flows differently in the spirit world. Regardless, there's a strong disconnect sometimes with the current goal and how fast you want to move to reach that goal. Anything faster than a brisk walk in these moments would convey a bit more involvement, emotion, and urgency. I enjoyed the plot, I did. It was a lot of fun, but they fumbled their handling of the more sensitive material from the very beginning. When starting a new game, you're given a trigger warning stating topics touch upon highly sensitive subjects with the intent of treating them seriously. What's missing are keywords notifying the player what kind of topics might be triggering when the game goes over topics like child abuse, emotional abuse, suicide, self-harm, political viewpoints, and assault during the Holocaust. Going forward in this video, I'll be talking further in depth about the story, specific characters, and their relation to one another in order to discuss how I feel the subject matter has been handled. This will double as a spoiler warning and a trigger warning, so if you don't want to hear about these topics, please go to this timecode. This part of my critique holds a lot of weight on my thoughts about the medium's story, so if you want to avoid spoilers, I do recommend coming back to watch the rest of this video after you play the game for yourself. While the plot was enjoyable, it seemed to ignore or even harm the characters' sensitive themes and how trauma is dealt with. The medium sees Marianne and Thomas either listening to the echoes of or entering the minds of those who've experienced severe trauma in the past in an attempt to deal with that trauma. Marianne is interested in helping them pass on to the afterlife, while Thomas uses his powers to get back at those who have done him wrong. I like the dynamic that each character uses their powers for a different reason, while still falling within their own sense of justice. Thomas's daughter Lily was a victim of child abuse, which, as it's revealed she's also a powerful medium, results in a monster born as a manifestation of her trauma. After it's revealed that Richard was the one who abused Lily, Thomas then enters his mind in order to harm him to get revenge and to prevent him from harming anyone else. Richard's mind reveals that he's been a victim of his own trauma, detailing his life growing up in Nazi-occupied Poland in World War II, and with an abusive family. It goes into explicit detail about the terrible things that have happened to Richard, and I'm willing to empathize with him if this was an entirely separate character interaction, but not directly after we find out about his actions of abuse toward our victim Lily. It comes across as trying to excuse his actions, and tells a narrative of an abused becoming an abuser. You even give what's left of him exactly what he asks for, non-existence. The relationship between Richard and Lily and the implications just rub me the wrong way. Thomas's actions serve to impose his own sense of justice. Thomas's actions can also be seen as morally bad, but they make sense. Because of his close relationship to his daughter Lily, and because of his unique abilities, you can still understand his actions. Marianne, on the other hand, states that she doesn't pass judgment, only sends spirits off to the afterlife. By the time Marianne gets to Richard, what's left is only a monster representing his sins. Aware that he's Lily's abuser, her actions also feel like they excuse his behavior. Richard begs to be set free and become nothing. Marianne then tells him that he deserves nothing, while setting him free for the sole reason that it's her self-imposed duty as a medium. The omission of judgment makes this scene really awkward. It feels empty, with Marianne not expressing a reason for her actions, while giving Richard what he wants. If Marianne showed personal motivation, whether it be her earlier shown kind and optimistic disposition, to maybe see him rehabilitate himself in the afterlife, or even anger or frustration to send him someplace where he'll properly be judged. Either would serve to condemn Richard's actions while resolving the conflict. Alternatively, if Richard's abusive actions were removed from the story, and we were just exploring Richard's past through his mind, on its own, it's a helpful retelling of the effects and trauma as a result of Nazis' Poland occupation. As someone who both wasn't alive during the events of the Holocaust, and somebody who grew up in America, being exposed to this personal perspective within a video game story like The Mediums is really welcome. Richard's mind becomes an interesting contrast when exploring Henry's mind. Again, I like these moments in context of the plot. It's cool that you enter Henry's mind expecting to uncover Henry's past trauma, and in a way you do. What makes this moment interesting is that everything expressed in Henry's mind turns out to be bait to trap Thomas, when Thomas was there to do the same thing he did to Richard. Henry's behavior implies that he has no remorse, that his actions are intentionally and simply in his nature. When serving the plot, it's okay, but it does become weird again when trying to relate it to the themes of trauma. It's just shocking that his behavior was explained that simply. Entering his mind doesn't serve to expand any explanation for his actions. The story doesn't acknowledge the antagonists owning mistakes or rehabilitating. Rather, it excuses or never resolves their behavior. This fumbling of ideas and messages reaches its harshest peak during the final cutscene. At the end, it's revealed Lily's trauma manifested after her abuse at the hands of Richard. This manifestation became Ma, who then caused the Riva Resort massacre. Lily acted selfishly, releasing Ma in order to save herself and her sister Marianne from a house fire when they were young. Lily does feel regret. Lily does have trauma, but she does want to make things right. But what happened next was truly shocking. The proposed solution to stop Lily's manifestation of trauma, what Lily says she wants to happen, is to have Marianne shoot and kill her so that Marianne can send her spirit to the afterlife and maul with it. Here's someone who's dealing with intense emotions, someone who feels like a burden, who feels guilty, asking her sister to shoot and kill her to stop her manifestation of trauma. Marianne clearly doesn't want to kill her sister, instead points the gun at herself, adding another baffling solution, that if Marianne kills herself, the monster won't have a new host. If Maul was a result of Lily's trauma, then what kind of new trauma would result from seeing her sister shot right in front of her eyes? It's treating death as a solution, hammered in carelessly with the repeated phrase, "You can't save everyone, Butterfly." The screen turns black as a gunshot is heard, and the game ends. All of this happens in the final minutes of the game. This ending hit me like a truck, and not in a good way. There's a trigger warning with the intent of treating its content seriously. The solutions provided are not real solutions and don't parallel a healthy real-world solution. The messages taken from this can be harmful when the game talks about trauma with abusers and the abused. The ending's not interested in providing closure. Instead, it wanted a vague, shocking ending. When including the post-credits scene, it's more interested in teasing a sequel. I don't want to end this video on such a bad note, because there's still a lot here to love, and I enjoyed my time with the medium. I just feel my thoughts regarding the game's themes and messaging can spark productive conversations. But it's not all bad. They hit on something truly inspired with the dual reality mechanic. It's used to craft a gorgeous world, with a fun cinematic story, unique puzzle and exploration mechanics. Gameplay only falling short when it comes to its interactions with the main monster. Those moments felt shallow and separated from the rest of the gameplay. I can see the passion from Bloober team coming from this project, and I am glad I played it. It's a game with ideas that I can still see plenty more potential from, and I hope they continue to expand on these ideas in their future releases. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more like it, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/RyanBeardy, follow me on Twitter at RyanBeardy, and I have a Discord with the links below.